Can you just elaborate a little more on bonding and the love connection?
Absolutely. So I'm not a psychologist, by the way, by training, so there's a lot of, people can probably speak better to attachment theories and that sort of thing. But in order for us to, and I can speak from a biological point of view, but in order for us to survive as a species, there needs to be something that keeps us together so that we stay together. Because otherwise we would just, like I said, women would be more selective, men would take off. But remember, we evolved in the wilderness. We didn't have roofs over our heads. We needed to be in a social infrastructure. We needed to have a group, a community that would keep us together, that would see that we have value, and especially in the small family unit. So there actually needs to be a bonding mechanism. And bonding comes from a feeling of pleasure, of safety, of you're making me feel good, so I want to come back for more. So the pleasure centers in our brain, which is also the addiction centers, or those dopaminergic reward centers that also release endorphins and morphine-like substances and oxytocin that make you get literally a high. Now, you can get that high in many different ways. You can get that with your pets. You can get that when you're out in nature. You can get that watching a beautiful sunset. And those things that make you feel, oh, so good, you want to go back for more. So it's nature's way of saying, this is a good thing. This is conducive for survival. Now, addictions happen because we start from a low place. And then something makes me feel high. So it's sort of a false good, as opposed to when we raise that elevation to spiritual love, where it's that sort of the equanimity of that oneness, where it's something that is like, I'm like, versus good addiction versus bad addiction, but it's a healthy one. It's a healthy one that allows for that nourishment, as opposed to like fake nourishment. So, for instance, comfort food is fake nourishment. Okay, because you're not really solving, there's eating because I'm hungry, which is adaptive coping, and there's I'm eating because I'm anxious, which is maladaptive coping. So I'm still coping, but I'm not actually addressing the issue of not feeling safe. But the food's releasing neurotransmitters that are temporarily make me feel better. So bonding is one of the things that allows us to feel safe. But again, there's the adaptive bonding and maladaptive bonding. So, and the attachment theories and things like that. I hope I answered the question. Great, thank you. Okay.
I actually have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand.
Oh, I raised it at the same time you kind of
started speaking.
It's all good.
Without raising my hand.
Yes.
Clarify for me, because I'm under a little bit of a different impression. Okay. My understanding is that the part that has to do with mating, that attraction, has to do with dopamine, adrenaline, pheromones. And that is different from oxytocin, vasopressin, endorphins.
Correct.
Because I always thought that one of the problems was that when people first meet, they have that dopamine, adrenaline rush, the pheromones kick in. And in order to keep that, because you were kind of talking about back, in order to keep that, they will behave what I call nicely or lovingly. Otherwise, they get the pink slip, right? So when they behave respectfully and courteously, and they're thoughtful, and they're appreciative, and they very much accept the flaws in order to keep the dopamine and the adrenaline rush and all that going, the person now is under the impression that they found that source of unconditional love they had in their childhood. They found that nourishment that they've been looking for all this time. So that becomes kind of a killer cocktail in terms of wanting to be in that relationship and having that. And people do fairly good keeping that combination. And then we have something we call the honeymoon period. Sometimes it happens right during dating. After a few dates or a few months, people don't try that hard. They think that they're now have the job, whatever that is. And then they become much less attractive when they stop being nurturing.
Do you want me to address that?
Well, and then we have again the honeymoon period where people have now definitely have the job. And
then it wears off.
Well,
And then it get reconnected. So a lot of there's a lot we don't know, by the way. So I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers to that. But what we do know is that oxytocin plays a role in that honeymoon period. Like I said, it makes us a little bit blind, right? It makes us trust and say, oh, that's okay that you have those faults. And as that starts sort of wearing off, right, we say, oh, really? that thing that I used to love is now irritating me. So a lot of that, you know, one of the interesting things, I was saying this at lunch, that, you know, childbirth, right, is one of the more painful things that any woman would have to go through. And why does she do it more than once? Okay, and so to actually give birth, you for uterine contraction, you actually need oxytocin to make that happen, and the receptors for oxytocin increase 400-fold, 400-fold to make that happen. And so what also is happening, what it also does is creates amnesia, analgesia, and euphoria, so that you'll want to do it again. Okay, again, it's biologically brilliant. So there's the same thing with. Whoever humanly designed us knew that we needed to have a honeymoon report to latch it, to say, is this going to be enough time to actually reproduce, get them to be together, blah, blah, blah. And now I can actually trail it off, you know, and then they can actually see each other for who they are. But there's something happening in the brain with the initial relationship period and then moving into the initial meeting, honeymoon phase, and then going into a relationship phase. There is actually something going on in the brain that's related to this interchange of neurotransmitters. And that initial period of dating is actually stressful. You know, so you need the adrenaline, you need the dopamine to actually make you sort of go and do it. But why am I going to do it? Because the objective is like that reward, right? The dopaminergic reward system. The objective of the feel-good, of having that attraction, of falling in love. That is my objective because I know it's going to feel good. What sustains it is where we come in, is how do we sustain that feeling? How do we sustain that love so it's not blind love? You know, that falling in love where we're sort of blindly trusting, but the acceptance love of moving into, you know, that oxytocin is more of not associated with the adrenaline and dopamine and that sort of high, but into sort of the sustainability of, you know, I love you and I accept you with all your faults. And not because I'm madly in love with you because I want to reproduce, but because I want to have a coexistence. So, you know, I think science is behind on that. You know, what's really going on in the brain, but it's a very good question, or statement.
Just to follow through with that, though, I mean, 100 years ago, a woman was a property of a man. So if a man killed his wife, he wouldn't go to jail because she was considered his property. Kids were his property along with his property. So when we're talking about evolution, we're talking about a million years or whatever we're talking about in terms of human beings, where women had no choice. It wasn't about if they didn't have the adrenaline rush or something like that or oxytocin, they would just say, no, I'm not going to have kids anymore. They were going to have kids because they were property, they were inseminated, and they were kids. Maybe biology created this to literally be able to cope with
Perhaps.
This.
I don't know.
You know,
I wasn't there.
Women, but I'm saying women having that choice.
Yeah.
You know, that do I want that pain one more time? That choice is very, very recent in our evolution.
Yeah, and I think again, there's so much we don't know, and I love this discussion. And you know, what is higher consciousness, right? I think you were bringing that up last night. You know, what is higher consciousness? What is it that we have access to? It is higher consciousness the ability to have choice and be able to step away from that primitive fight or flight. I need to mate. Oh, this feels good, I want to do it, which is what addictions are. To let me create space for this. Is there the space and the breath of this? You know, is that consciousness? You know, is that to be able to rise it to that spiritual love, that I call it that, you can call it whatever you want, of creating that space that I don't have to be with this person because I need to reproduce. I want to be with this person. And so maybe that's an element of, you know, again, I don't know, I'm posing the question, is that an element of, higher emotional intelligence or a higher consciousness state, which I'll, let you talk about more. Is that, I don't know. But it is, but what I do know, and this is, I'll let you take the floor after this. What I do know is, and I get excited about this, is that this human design is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's meant to exist and to live and to thrive, and that we as beings, as species, the primitive part of us is trying to cause us to die. And my big question is, how do we thrive? How do we thrive as a society? How do we thrive as a planet? how do we thrive as people, and that is through this nourishment of love. And so, but all this other stuff, don't know, but maybe science will start picking up on that. Maybe we'll do the research and figure that out.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
So thank you so much.
I think she had a...
Well, I think for now, if we can hold it, that would be fabulous. Yeah. So let's move on so we can all thrive together.